Hello and welcome to another Giant Slayer TFT Top 5 Countdown video. Today our analysts will be listing the top 5 compositions for patch 10.23. Overall, the meta hasn't really changed much in the last few patches, so expect to see a lot of familiar compositions in today's list. But there was a hotfix to Talon that may shake up the power ranking slightly, depending on how much of an impact those changes have on Talon as a carry. With all that said, let's dive on in. But before we begin, please don't forget to click the links in our description. Give your support to everyone who helped make this video happen. We host many TFT tournaments with plenty of exciting content to come, so be sure to also follow our Giant Slayer TFT social media pages. Alright, let's get back to the video. Starting off today's top 5, we have Nami Enlightened coming in as the number 5 comp. There's quite a few builds that could be in the number 5 slot, such as Ari Vanguard or other reroll builds, but Nami Enlightened has proven to be an overall more consistent build than those. And while it is primarily a reroll comp, so it's kind of difficult to force, it's still doing better than the majority of the other builds in the meta. So what makes Nami Enlightened so good? Well, Nami with a Luden's Echo can carry through the early and mid game quite well. In addition to Nami, you have great synergies for the current meta, such as Enlightened, Adept, and Dazzler. Combine all those together and you get a comp that can consistently top 4. Of course, placing above that is possible, but it will be difficult as Nami will be outscaled by other builds. The goal when playing Nami Enlightened is to hit an early chosen Nami with a Luden's Echo. From there, you want to slow roll at level 5 to get a Nami 3, and after that, you level like normal and add in additional Enlightened units. The core champions at level 7 will be Nami, Janna, Aurelia, Morgana, with Shen, Lux, and a mage like Lulu or Lilia, assuming you have a mage chosen Nami. If you don't, then you can add in both mages at level 8. Keep in mind that this build is entirely dependent on finding Nami as a chosen early on in the game, as well as giving her a Ludens. Without that, you're unlikely to be able to force this build. Also, you don't have to roll for Nami 3 if you're strong enough during stage 3 and 4. You can instead look to fast 9 and transition into a 5-cost focus build. Let's move on to the next composition, which comes in at number 4, Sharpshooters. Sharpshooters got a bit of love in 10.23, mainly because other compositions were slightly nerfed. Sure, Talon is still going to be an issue, but he can be dealt with by positioning well or playing an item like ZZ Rot Portal. More importantly, Hunter compositions aren't as devastating to play against for Sharpshooters, as their frontline will last slightly longer, giving the backline time to do more damage. Both Jinx and Jhin are the primary carries for this build, but their items aren't that important to focus on compared to getting 1 or 2 Zeke's Herald. Zeke's is going to be the key to Sharpshooters doing well in the late game, as the attack speed buff is insanely good for them. In addition to that, you need a Bramble Vest for your front line, and preferably a ZZ Rot Portal to help pull assassins off of your squishy backline. Another item to keep in mind is Guardian Angel. Since Talon will target the champion with the lowest armor, it's important to give a Chain Vest item on your main carry, so either give a GA to your Jinx or your Jhin. After that, you can focus on standard carry items, with Rageblade Shojin being common for Jinx, and items like Infinity Edge, Deathblade, and Giant Slayer all being good on Jhin. The last thing to keep in mind is that Sharpshooters do need a chosen Sharpshooter to scale well into the late game. Ideally, you'll be able to find a Jhin or a Jinx chosen, but even one of the other champions is fine, as securing the 6-piece trait is important. Next up, we have Ashe Hunter as the number 3 composition. Hunters got hit fairly hard by the nerfs in 10.23, but they're still doing well enough in the meta despite losing a bit of damage. Ashe is still a top tier carry, and even though she's easier to kill, she actually got slightly buffed because Talon will now target the lowest armored champion. That means that you can slap a Guardian Angel on her, play 3 Elderwood, and it's unlikely that Talon is going to go after her for quite some time in a team fight. Previously, it was really hard to keep Talon from jumping onto your Ashe, so now you have more ways to counter Talon. In general, the core champions for playing Ashe Hunter are going to vary. It really depends on what frontline you play. Adept is the most common, but it's also the most contested, so instead of playing Shen, Aurelia, Yone, you look to play primarily Brawlers or Elderwoods instead. Keep in mind with Elderwoods is that they all gain armor the longer combat goes on, which may make an enemy Talon target your Ashe earlier than you'd want in a team fight. One of the downsides to playing Hunters is that yes, their burst damage went down. This hurts their ability to take down a frontliner super quickly, but if you stack items on Ashe and give your Kindred a Chalice, it's still going to be enough damage overall to kill most champions quickly. One last thing to consider is that Divine was buffed, so you can look to make your Ashe a Divine champion if you have a Spatula. That way you can play Warwick and 2 other Divine champions, and you'll have quite the strong comp. Alright, let's move on to the next build that's coming in at number 2 for today's list, Dusk. First, let's say that Dusk and Hunter builds are around equal value in the meta. The main reason as to why we're placing Dusk slightly higher is due to the nerfs that Ashe Hunter received. Dusk is also less reliant on playing Adept and isn't hard countered by it, which makes it overall more consistent. As far as the core champions for Dusk, it's all about Riven. Riven is your primary carry, so 2-starring her is essential, whether as a chosen or not. After that, you're going to aim for 4 or 6 Dusk, depending on whether or not you have a chosen Dusk or a spatula. Having a spatula is quite strong for Dusk, since a lot of champions do well as Dusk. Champions such as Kayn, Jhin, and Yone are just a few of the many that you can turn into a Dusk unit. Besides Dusk, you can go for standard splash traits like Adept and Mystic. Keep in mind, Adept, specifically Shen, is going to be heavily contested. Sharpshooter, Keeper, and even Cultist can all be good additions as well. Sejuani is always useful to add since she provides a lot of additional CC. In terms of items for Riven, well, that's where Riven shines, as you can give her a wide assortment of items. Defensive items tend to do best as you just want her to stay alive the whole fight, so items like Bramble Vest, Guardian Angel, or Quicksilver are great. Deathcap can be decent, but Ionic Spark is slightly better since it lowers nearby enemies' magic resist. Lastly, a great item to give her is Hand of Justice, as you're either rolling extra damage or healing, both of which are good on Riven. The one downside to playing Dusk is the fact that Talon will no longer get stuck on your Riven if you have a Bramble Vest. It was a strong counter to Talon prior to that change, and while it won't impact the fight too much, it does make Riven with Bramble Vest slightly less effective against Talon players. And the number one composition for patch 1023 is Talon Enlightened. Of course, this does need to be prefaced by the fact that Talon did receive a hotfix. They fixed a bug where he would occasionally target himself with his ability, but more importantly for balance, his bonus attack damage at level 2 went down to 200% from 225%. Now that may not seem like much, but it is still a nerf, and that means that you'll have to wait and see whether the meta shifts or not. More than likely, Talon is still going to be strong, and Talon Enlightened will remain the best composition, most likely. Now, let's talk about what makes this build so good. Talon is one of the main reasons, as his burst damage is so good at taking down squishy targets. Despite having his targeting change, it actually ended up being slightly better for him. Sure, he won't go after the main carry early on in the fight, but he also no longer gets stuck on champions with Bramble Vest like Sejuani or Riven. This means he's going to, overall, do more damage in fights. The enemy carry may live a bit longer with a Guardian Angel, but all of the slightly squishier enemy champions will be killed much faster than before. And because they slowed down the leap animation for Talon, he's a bit safer in fights since the invulnerability during his jump is longer. Besides Talon, the rest of the composition is still essentially the same. Aim to pick up additional Enlightened champions and pair them with Adept, Dazzler, and Mystic. It is important to keep in mind that both Shen and Talon will be heavily contested, so trying to 2-star both of them will be difficult. But if you find a chosen Talon or even a chosen Shen, you're going to be in a strong position to finish first or second in your lobby. All in all, Talon Enlightened was both slightly buffed and nerfed in 1023, but no other composition really comes close to how dominant it can be, so if your goal is to win games, look to play this comp. That's going to be it for our top 5 compositions for patch 1023. But before we go, we have a few honorable mentions to talk about. Our first honorable mention is Duelist. Duelist is another one of the reroll compositions in the meta. It's not quite as strong in the mid and late game as Nami Enlightened, but it does extremely well in the early game because of Yasuo. Yasuo is also the foundation of this composition, so make sure you're only playing this build if you find a chosen Yasuo. One of the issues for Duelist is that the champions are relatively squishy compared to a lot of other builds. What that means is that this comp will get outscaled in the late game because the champions won't do enough damage before getting killed. There was one change that may help, and that's a rework to Xin Zhao. Xin Zhao now gains armor and magic resist every time he casts his ability, which means the longer the fight goes on, the harder he is to kill. While this won't help the rest of the Duelist stay alive, it does mean that Duelist has the potential to scale well in the late game by playing for a Xin Zhao 3. It may not be enough to make this build to get a top 2, but it should certainly help make it more consistent. The next honorable mention is Diana Carey. Diana is another reroll focused build and possibly the hardest to pull off. That's because you need to have Diana with Moonlight Chosen, and you have to 3-star both her and Lysandra. That's a lot to have to hit for this build to do well, so it's the least consistent of the 3 reroll comps. But that said, it also has some of the highest potential to win games because Diana 4 is scary good. look to give your Diana defensive items like Bramble Vest, Titan's Resolve, Dragon's Claw, or Quicksilver. In addition to that, she does really well with a Hextech Gunblade, as the healing keeps her alive longer in fights. Basically, if you can get great items for Diana, 3-star both her and Lysandra, and one of them is a chosen Moonlight, then this build is great to play. If you're not able to get any of those aspects, then we recommend playing other builds. And our last honorable mention is Ahri Vanguard Mystic. Yes, Ahri's not doing all that well right now in the meta, but she's still a viable option if you manage to high roll. What we mean by that is if you can secure a really quick RE2 with good items and hit your front line, you're going to be in a really good position to top 3. But being able to hit everything you need is difficult and makes this build quite inconsistent. Another thing to consider is that Vanguards naturally have a lot of armor, which means your backline is quite susceptible to Talon now that he targets the champion with the lowest armor, so be sure to give your Ahri a Guardian Angel. Overall though, if you want to play this build, we only recommend it if you can 2-star all of the necessary champions early on in stage 4, which does require a bit of luck to do. And that's going to be it for today's video, folks. Unfortunately, the meta hasn't really changed much in the last few patches, but at least there's still a wide variety of builds to play if you're tired of trying to force Talon every game. Let us know in the comment section below what compositions you've been playing and if we missed any that you think deserve to be on the list. Thank you for watching, and if you're enjoying our content, be sure to hit the like button and subscribe for future Giant Slayer TFT videos.